However, getting the diagnosis takes you having a whole lot of those traits combined and actually having difficulty with that in your daily life. Usually people get paid to be an actor, right? I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to play this role. Hi lovely people, I have my tea, so let's chat. I'm actually really nervous to film this video and I don't know where to start. But if this is going to help even just one person, I feel like it's worth it for me to share this. So let's just get into this. So if you've been following along for a while, you probably know that I am dyslexic, but I actually have another label. That's what you want to call it, another diagnosis. And that's a diagnosis I'm not as quickly to share. Not exactly because I'm ashamed of it, because it's just who I am, it's a part of me and I've quite accepted it. But it is a diagnosis that most people don't exactly understand, and I'm kind of afraid that people will start to treat me differently once they know. So for a lot of people I know that's not going to be the case, and a lot of people that are closer to me already know it. I mean, it's not a secret. So the diagnosis I'm talking about is autism. I'm autistic. It's something that I've been since birth, though I did get the diagnosis quite late on in life. Late, I mean, I'm 27 right now, so it's not going to be exactly late, but I did get the diagnosis as an adult when I was, I think, 24 years old. And knowing it about myself has given me so much clarity, and it has helped me to truly understand myself. It has helped me to work with the way that my brain works instead of working against it, which I feel like is what I was doing a lot before I knew that I'm autistic. So how did I find out that I'm autistic? How did I get that diagnosis? I was actually the one that first got these signals by my knowing, because I'll tell you a little bit later on, there was actually someone who already knew since I was a little girl, but nothing was done with that information. So I was diagnosed 3 years ago, and the first really meeting, I guess, with autism, because there are multiple people in my surroundings with autism that are autistic, so I had encountered it that way. That said, I am on the lighter side of the spectrum, so it's not as visible, I guess, with me. Also, I'm a woman. I've only seen it in men, in boys before, so it does look quite different in women versus in men, and it does look different in girls versus in boys. But the first time I had kind of, I guess, an inkling was while reading The Horse Boy. So this is a series of books that I love. I should actually read them again. It's been a while since I read them. But it is written by, I think he's called Robert Isaacson, and he's talking about his son who has autism, and with their journey basically learning how to deal with it, how to work with it instead of against it. It's beautiful, those books. But I first found out about a few traits, I guess, of the autism in me through that book, though I did not make the link yet. For some reason, I did not make the link between having those traits and me actually being autistic. So one of those things was having difficulty with eye contact. I have struggled with this for as long as I can remember. It's not comfortable to make eye contact at all. If you are really close to me, it's definitely easier for me, but I don't like holding eye contact. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's like people are staring right into my soul, and it just feels invasive, I guess. I think that's the best way to describe it. So I first found out that that's not a normal feeling through those books. I think it was maybe in the second book, I'm not sure in which book it was, but the author was talking to a slightly older autistic boy about how far he's gone basically and how he's dealing with certain things. And that's when it came up that it's actually really uncomfortable for a lot of autistic people to make eye contact, but especially to hold eye contact. It doesn't feel natural to us. And I was like, oh, so that's not a normal feeling. Not everyone's feeling like that. I never realized that it might not be a normal thing to not like making eye contact in a world that basically everyone is trying to make eye contact. I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but I only realized that it wasn't normal through reading that book. And I actually got some good tips from him through the book that actually make it easier to seem like you're making eye contact, not quite making eye contact. Because if I'm actually making eye contact, like the way people expect you to, I can get so distracted because I have some difficulty focusing on actually hearing what we're talking about. I really struggle following the conversation when I'm actually making eye contact. So there's the thing about like looking right in between the eyes that can help. For me, what's mostly been helpful is almost objectifying the eyes. So looking at the colors, looking at the shape of the eye. So not necessarily feeling like I'm looking at the eyes of a person, more like I'm looking at an object. That way it's so much easier to actually make eye contact, but it still takes quite a bit out of me. So it's not something that comes natural to me. Okay, so that was a whole tangent. But there were a few things in those books that I was like, oh yeah, I do have that, but for some reason I never put two and two together and realized that I might be autistic. That came a little bit later with a different book that I read. So at some point I stumbled upon the book by Bianca Toops, and that is called But You Do Not Look Autistic at All. And that is when it actually clicked for me. So this is a book which basically collects a lot of stories of autistic women specifically about their experience being autistic and the struggles that they have in their daily lives, the things that it brings to them, because it's also a bit of a superpower in some cases. So reading that book, it finally clicked for me, oh, I might actually be autistic myself. I recognized so much of the stories of the women in that book. So after reading that, I really started diving a little bit deeper into the whole world of autism, into specifically also autism in women. And I really started to realize I'm probably just autistic and not just socially awkward, which is how I saw myself before this. So at some point I decided to share these thoughts with my mother, and she then told me that my aunt had actually already told her this when I was just a little girl. That said, my parents never saw a reason for me to get tested, so I was never tested. The information was not exactly shared with me before, so for then it was the end of it. But after sharing this, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I ended up deciding to go into the diagnosis process, which can take a while. I mean, here in the Netherlands at least, it first takes you going to a doctor who is then going to send you through to a psychologist who is specialized in actually doing the whole diagnosis process. Specifically, I went to a psychology practice that was used to working with adults, but also with adult women and autism. And it took several appointments, several tests for me to get the diagnosis. It was kind of interesting actually, diving into it through that side of it. There were so many things I just thought were little quirks of me that ended up being just plain very clear autistic traits. And also it was interesting to see how I had learned to mask certain things, how I'd learned to recognize me doing a certain thing and then kind of redirect so that things would be a little bit easier for me in my day-to-day life. Just a very simple example of that was I had to draw figures. Like, my psychologist gave me a certain, almost looking like a coloring sheet with a whole lot of lines on there, and he asked me to draw those lines on a blank sheet of paper. I mean, I like drawing, sure, I'm gonna do that for you. And I have always been very likely to actually start with the details. I am so detail oriented, and that's how I started doing this drawing. I started going into like a little cross detail, I think. That's where I started, and from there I wanted to build it out and make things. However, I saw pretty quickly that that was not going to work, and that the alignments, I guess, the proportions would be completely off if I was going to carry on this way. So I switched to first drawing out the outlines and then filling it in. So he noticed this and he asked me about this. So this is actually a strategy that I had learned in art school, and while I always have the inclination to start with the details, I know if I'm doing that, my drawing is going to end up completely off in the end. So I need to zoom out, start with the outlines, and then fill that in later to get it right. So I told him this, and then he didn't really comment further on it, but at the end, when he took me through the diagnosis process and of the tests and why he made certain decisions, he told me that it's actually really normal thing for autistic individuals to start out on the details, because they actually often have difficulty seeing the whole picture. So we really need to learn how to zoom out, how to piece together all the details into the bigger picture for it to make sense for us. So he thought it was really interesting to see how I actually start out on the details and then completely switched tactics into filling first out the outlines and then filling it in further. Okay, sorry, that was a little tangent again. So it took several interviews with me. I had to answer a whole gazillion lot of questions and do a whole gazillion lot of tests. But they were also talking with my parents, asking me about my childhood, about my younger years. And in the end, I ended up getting the diagnosis, yes, autism. It's pretty clear that that's what's going on here. And I can tell you, it felt like such a relief to get that diagnosis. So up until this point, I wasn't really sure what to think. In one way, I was like, maybe I'm autistic, then what I'm going to do. But also, what if I'm going into this process and I'm not autistic? That means that I'm recognizing myself in a lot of the autistic traits, but I'm not autistic. And me even thinking that I might be autistic might then actually hurt autistic people, because maybe they feel like I'm not taking their autism seriously enough. So there was so much going on through my mind before getting the actual diagnosis. So when I finally got that diagnosis, it was such a relief. And that also brings me into something else. I think it's something that I hear weekly, that people are saying, oh, it's just one of my autistic traits. Oh, it's just my autism that's doing this, or that's making me do this, in this joking way. But I don't think that's okay. That is actually kind of, it feels a little belittling, I guess that's the best word to describe it, when people talk in a way like that. So just to be clear, it's not people that know that I am autistic who are saying this. They have probably no clue what they are talking about or who they are talking to. I'm not, like I already said, I'm not very quick to share this diagnosis with people that are not super close to me. But yeah, I am 99% sure that in about 90% of these cases there is absolutely no case of autism there. And people talking in a way like that, it feels like they are not taking the diagnosis seriously. They probably just don't know a thing about the diagnosis. They just know the stereotype of this very rigid person only working through their own routines, not thinking about anyone else in their environments. They probably just know that stereotype, and when a little something is matching that with a trait that they have, they link that to, oh, it's just my autism. Yeah, no. I mean, a lot of things in autism are just human traits. We all probably have one or two traits that fall within that diagnosis. However, getting the diagnosis takes you having a whole lot of those traits combined and actually having difficulty with that in your daily life. So it first needs to be an obstacle in your daily life, either for you or for the people around you, in order to actually be autism. Just let that sink in for a little bit. There needs to be a struggle there in order to get a diagnosis. So while you may not see it on the outside, you don't see everything that's going inside of my mind, that's going on there. You don't see that. A lot of the time I'm masking that, which is a very common trait in autistic individuals, especially in women. And that goes for all neurodivergent women especially. We are so good at masking that for the most part people are not going to notice much about us unless we tell them what is going on. And it's really hard to stop this. It's also really hard to keep it up. It takes so much energy out of a person to consistently mask a personality trait, because that's really what it is. It is ingrained in me. It's not something that you can take out. It's not a disease that you can cure, which is, I think, is still insane that people think that way. It's just part of me. It's part of how my brain works. So autism, how the brain works, is differently from your neurotypical brain. Probably because the growing stages, I guess, that you're going through as a very young child are kind of flipped. That's how my psychologist told it me. Instead of first focusing on building the human-to-human connections, which is how most neurotypicals' brains work, that's the first part that's really getting like the growing spurt, I guess, in the brain. We are first going into the more analytic side of our brain, into the analyzing of things, of situations, of the world, not necessarily focusing in on the human connection. So while by neurotypicals, first you're focusing in on the human connection, from there you are focusing in on analyzing the world, basically. So that's just the growing stage that you're going through. I don't know out of the top of my head what these are called. I might not explain this in exactly the best way, but I'm trying. But for autism, usually you first focusing in on that analytic side of your brain, developing that, and then from there you are starting to focusing in on the human connection side of your brain. And having it this way means that right from the start your thinking is just differently. Your brain has developed differently. You are developing certain parts of your brain stronger than other parts, and it's different from your neurotypical brain. So literally our brain just works differently, and trying to mask a brain that works differently is hard work. It's like you are trying to play a role the entire day, day in, day out, day in, day out. You are trying to play this role in order to fit in. That is exhausting. I can tell you that. It's exhausting. So just try to think of it that way. Usually people get paid to be an actor, right? I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to play this role. Yet I still do it in order to survive really in this world that's very much set up for neurotypicals, which makes sense. It's the biggest part of the population, but it still brings some difficulties with it. So what has getting the diagnosis actually gotten me? What has it brought me? So finally, a lot of the personal traits that I had a really hard time understanding and giving a place made perfect sense. I really started to understand myself, understand why I'm reacting to certain things the way that I do, because in a lot of ways, like, I'm seeing that my reaction is different from other people, but I cannot help that. It's just the way that I'm reacting, and I'm not understanding why my reaction is so different from that of someone else. It did not make any sense for me why that would be, and those things finally started to make sense for me. I started to understand the way that my brain works, and I started to slowly learn how to work with that instead of against it. And I'm going to be completely honest, that is still something I'm very much working on today. It's not easy to just completely change that from one day to another. I mean, I've gone 24 years without knowing any of this, so it's as if you're completely getting to know yourself all over again. Except this time you are able to make the puzzle pieces actually fit and put them in the right place instead of looking at them and just knowing they are there, just not knowing how they fit in, which is so frustrating. So since getting the diagnosis, I've been slowly able to piece some of the pieces together and make sense of it, out of it. Make sense out of that jumbled mess of traits and reactions that I couldn't really give a place before. I'm slowly giving them a place and understanding them, learning how to deal with them, learning how to live with them, learning how to order my life, I guess, in a way that helps me actually enjoy my life, actually get the rest that I need, because that's not always easy in your adult life, I can tell you that. It was a lot easier when I was younger. So let me know, are you dealing with neurodiversity? Are you not? Either yourself, maybe someone close to you? I would really like to hear your experience. Also, if you want me to dive a little bit deeper on anything regarding this topic, maybe overstimulation or changes or whatever, let me know and I'll see if I can maybe do that for you, if you are interested in hearing my part of that story, I guess. For now, I wish you a lovely rest of your day and I will see you in my next video. Bye!